Welcome to Austin Eras, where we explore Austin's transformation into a 21st century boomtown and the voices shaping its past, present, and future.
Hi, I'm Adam Flagg, the host of the Austin Eras podcast, and today's guest is someone who's helped shape the policies, priorities, and platforms of Austin for more than 2 decades, often from behind the scenes. Matt Curtis is the founder of Smart City Policy Group, a government affairs firm helping to connect cities and stakeholders to understand modern, effective rules and compliance for the innovation economy. He served as the deputy to 2 Austin mayors, director at Capital Metro, and global head of public policy for HomeAway/Expedia.
Yeah, hard to imagine it was all done in 2 decades. What'd you say, more than 2 decades?
More than 2 decades?
It feels like it's been a really long time.
You've done a good job at this. You've been recognized in a number of ways. You've served on numerous boards in Austin. Austinite of the Year by Austin Under 40 in 2011, and one of the most memorable hosts of the Austin Under 40 Awards ever, in my mind.
I mean, nobody would say it like that, except for the fact that it was the most memorable host twice. But maybe that. I was also at Denton Citywide Karaoke Championship in 1993.
We missed that. We missed that on the bio.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
it comes in handy. It comes in handy.
Matt's worked with governments around the world. His heart's always been here in Austin. And in this episode, I think you're going to sound the alarm a little bit about what civic leadership succession looks like.
I'm Irish. I'm going to make people feel bad. That's what we do.
You're husband to Christy, father to a 4th grade daughter, and you've lived in Austin quite a long time. You grew up in Scranton, though.
Kind of. My family's from Scranton. I grew up 45 minutes north of Scranton in Endicott, New York. Scranton is the influential town that really impacted my youth.
Is it like IBM country?
It is. That's what brought us here, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've had run-ins with mayors, mafia bosses.
Believe it or not.
Mentoring a new generation of civic leaders. This is going to be a deep dive. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So you moved here from Endicott to Austin when you were 8 years old.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about growing up in this New York kind of Pennsylvania area. How does that what was growing up look like there versus here, and what's the differences of culture?
Well, it's funny, and what's the difference between the culture of northeastern Pennsylvania and upstate New York? And there's not much. There's this border that you hit somewhere along the way between Scranton and Binghamton, but for the most part, it's all part of the same. We lived there. My dad was with IBM. My parents are children of Irish immigrants, and my dad had gone into the military, worked, was serving with the military during the Korean conflict. He likes to point out that he was defending our borders from the beer halls in Belgium, where he was, there in the mid-1950s. But that brought him to IBM, which was great. But IBM is headquartered in Endicott, New York. We lived just a few minutes, literally blocks away in a little village called Endwell, but Endicott is a really neat town. It's got this Little Italy right in the middle of it, and I went to school there at a place called St. Anthony's of Padua, where I had to wear a jacket and a tie to school even when I was in 2nd grade. So moving here in 1980, I showed up for school at Deepwood Elementary on the first day, and there was a kid whose name was Lee, and he had a pair of Lee jeans on, and I'd never seen a kid wear jeans to school. Then there was another kid who had a T-shirt that said Van Halen, and I definitely never saw that at St. Anthony's. So it was bizarre and different, and I think they were totally freaked out by me because my mom made me wear a jacket and a tie on the first day of school.
Preppy clothes to school.
What a jerk. I looked like such a jerk, and I was branded that way. It was awful, and it was just a different time, and who knows what my parents were thinking, taking me from a Catholic school and putting me into public school and thinking that I still had to wear a tie. It was ridiculous.
So you wear these clothes and you're kind of, already kind of thinking political world. Even at that time, you're dressed like the politician in school.
I guess so. I didn't really think that way at first. I know that at some point in maybe about 5th grade, I had taken my mom's business cards and typed on the back, and I wrote something like, here to help solve your problems or something like that. So I was kind of really focused on constituent services or Magnum PI. Maybe it was more Simon & Simon, because I think one of those guys wore jackets and ties, maybe.
All right.
Yeah, it was weird.
So before you moved to Austin, you had a lot of family roots in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And there's this wild story that Russell Buffalino. Yeah. I looked this guy up. I looked at his pictures. He's an intimidating guy.
Yeah.
He was a mob boss who's featured in the movie The Irishman.
Right.
Who played him?
Joe Pesci. And until that movie came out, everybody made fun of me when I told this story because they wouldn't believe that Scranton had an organized crime family, nor would a Scranton organized crime family matter.
Yeah.
But they did, and so my mom, who had gone to Marywood College and studied fashion and later taught, a variety of different homemaking courses at Round Rock High School on how to make clothes. But she made clothes my whole life, and she still makes clothes now at 87 years old. And so going and buying fabric was a big thing. And if you remember in the movie, they show where Russell Buffalino works. He works from Pen and Drape in Pittston, Pennsylvania, where he sold fabric. It was a fabric store. And there was a reason fabric was, and clothing manufacturing was a big deal in northeastern Pennsylvania. So my mom would go there and buy fabric. And so maybe in about 1975, when I was 3, and my mom, when she tells this story, thinks it was hysterical, but she let me go into the store and run around the way a 3-year-old does. And I kept running into the back where, plain as day, there was Guff Guarnieri and Russell Buffalino and all the guys having a meeting. And my mom knew them. Everybody knew them. And so they shooed me out of the back room once, and they maybe shooed me out of the back room again. And finally, Russell Buffalino himself carries me out of the back room face first and hands me to my mom as if disgusted and said, "Lady, if you don't take care of this kid, we're going to." And my mom thinks it's the funniest story because she thinks it's the first time I got threatened by the mafia. I like to say it wasn't the last time, but it was the first time I got threatened by the mafia.
Well, a different day we'll talk about the other times.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. So you do come from a politically minded family. Your grandfathers were both politically active. One was president of the United Coal Miners Union.
Yeah.
Another led the Fourth Ward Democratic League. I also grew up with the grandfathers, super politically involved. So I'm curious about what that meant to you and what it was like growing up, hearing their stories and watching them set an example for you.
Yeah. Well, the example was funny. I mean, so one ran the kind of large local there in the Scranton area for the United Coal Miners Union. And so the stories that I heard when I was a kid were funny and sometimes very nuanced about, like, why were you getting in a fight with the cops in this one story, but then working along with the cops as you beat up some other group in another story. And there's a lot of clubbing and things going on. And it was just bizarre to me. I had a hard time understanding how nimble politics could be when I was a kid. But it was fun to hear. And I certainly enjoyed listening to my grandfather talk about, driving the anti-union guys into the Lackawanna River as they sort of chased after them with clubs. So this would probably be maybe in the 1930s, 1940s. And then my other grandfather, who had come from Addymast, this little village in the west of Ireland, where we were still very close with our family over there, he was the president of the Fourth Ward Democratic League. And so they ran kind of Scranton area politics, but as my mom puts it, they ran it for the Irish. So they made sure that Irish people were probably getting jobs, and that was probably what graft was like back then, or ward politics, if you will. And, it was probably fun. I remember him telling me, they were able to do things until the Italians took over. It was obviously a very different time. Yeah. You don't hear stories like that anymore. It's very different, but it was fun. I enjoyed hearing it. What I took from it, though, was interesting. They were also kind of intermixed with those stories were the dedication to the community. They would talk about the need to help the community, to help the church, to help the people. There was a very strong dedication to the poor and vulnerable, to those who are needy. And as somebody who is Irish and who is Catholic, we're sort of have both faith and works sort of really preached to us. And I really walked away with the works part and wanted to make sure that I stayed dedicated to the community. And that's what I learned from them, is the importance of helping those in need. And I think beyond the funny stories of antics of, industrial coal town politics, that they did good things for everybody, and that's what's important.
So you took away lessons of really supporting constituents, taking care of people, finding good policies. It's led to what you're doing today. But You come here in the jacket and tie at 8 years old. when did you first get involved in Texas politics, which is its own little animal? But what was your kind of first story getting involved there?
Yeah, that's a good question. My earliest memory, I remember being very obsessed with Carol Keaton, our female mayor of Austin in the late 1970s and like 80 and 81, I think. I was just absolutely fascinated by her. She was such a incredible spirit. She later became Carol Keaton McClellan, and then Carol Keaton McClellan Strayhorn, and then Carol Keaton McClellan Strayhorn Rylander, I think was how it ended
Okay.
up. But I was obsessed with her. I first met Ron Mullen when I was young. I really remember shaking hands with Ron Mullen, and I feel like he had a fabulous pale blue suit with like really wide lapels. I also remember thinking he was, like a strikingly handsome man. I don't know that people would say that now. Who knows what an 8-year-old thinks, I was also fascinated, back in those days, and I remember this, especially in Scranton, where, we would spend a lot of summers and that sort of thing. Before I had left that area, people putting the signs in the windows that they received in the newspaper, probably in the Scranton Times, that said, Ayatollah Khomeini, let our people go. And I remember it was about the hostages in Iran. And I remember asking about that and learning about that. What 8-year-old, gets into the weeds on international, foreign politics? And I did. I thought it was interesting. I don't know how it led to film school, but it did. But in Austin, I got really interested in local politics and mayors. I thought it was cool.
So you had Frank Cooksey, Lee Cook. You're 12 years old. You go to Spamorama. So for those of us, this is a great part about Austin Eras. Tell us about Spamorama. What was this?
Yeah.
What was it like being 12 years old in Austin in the 80s?
I mean, Spamorama was fun, and I might have been older than 12. I feel like it might have been 88, so I would have been maybe 16.
Okay.
And just to tell you really quickly about Spamorama, it was this fun festival where, people got together. It was built around cooking Spam and eating Spam and Spam, competition, throwing Spam and ridiculous things like that are frankly kind of gross to think about now. There was a lot of music and a lot of fun. It was weird and funky and cool. I certainly enjoyed it. For a kid, there wasn't a whole lot to do in Austin, so doing things like that were fun. Somehow or another, I was meandering through Spamorama, and Frank Cooksey, who was mayor from, I think, 85 to 88, and then Lee Cook, who would become mayor from 88 to 91, they were having a cook-off. Get it? A little play on their names. Yeah. They were having a cook-off there at Spamorama, and, the idea was to bring attention to Spamorama and probably raise money for something. But I just thought it was cool, I thought it was the neatest thing. And here are these two guys that kind of oddly look the same, and they're both still alive, and they're magnificent gentlemen. But they were running against each other for mayor, Cooksey for his second term, and Cook for what would be his one and only term. He only ran for one term. And I was so enthralled by it. I guess I'm kind of figuring out I'm a dork.
I mean, you grew up around politics.
I wore a tie to my first day of school. What a dork.
But you took that and turned it into civic engagement. And you grew up not in Austin, but in Round Rock.
Yeah, right.
So you spent a lot of time in Round Rock at that time. So I think I'd be curious to kind of understand, with Round Rock's massive expansion when Dell moved out there, which was what, early 2000s?
Oh, yeah, or 95 or something.
95?
Yeah.
I know they had multiple campuses around Austin. But I mean, what was Round Rock like in the 80s and 90s? Because I had to imagine it's pretty sleepy.
Yeah, I mean, sleepy would be some word that some people might use. I was going to say crappy. There wasn't a lot to do. But, in fairness, there wasn't a lot to do in Austin. Yeah. I was lucky that my brother and sister are about 10 years older than I am. So my parents, I think, were really bothered that I came along and disrupted the operation. And so they didn't know what to do with me. And my mom, who I mentioned earlier, taught at Round Rock.
Yeah.
But from, the early 80s until the later 80s, she actually worked at the Wilsey Hogg building at the bottom of the UT Tower. And so she would bring me down to Austin all the time. So while Round Rock was really boring and there wasn't a whole lot to do except ride your bike and, jump curbs and, oh man, I think you could go into downtown Round Rock, and there was a place called Rubio's Grocery, and you could get a little soda, and next door was Cliff's Book and Game, probably the only thing for a kid to do, and to buy a comic and get a, soda and maybe pedal a little farther and go to the town pool. I think there was only
Texas,
one.
Right? This is what it was.
Yeah. I mean, my hunch is in the mid-'80s when I was riding I never rode a BMX bike. I rode a Schwinn, but riding a Schwinn around, it couldn't have been more than 15,000 people, 15,000. I think when I graduated from high school, it was 25,000. Now it's 150,000, I think.
Just massive expansion. What do you think outside of Dell drove the expansion of Round Rock? Why do you think? Is it just people moved to Austin, went, oh, can't afford that, I'm going to Round Rock? Or Round Rock built its own economy, the baseball team? I mean, what drove that, you think?
Sure. Round Rock did a good job of steering itself towards having some character. Somewhere along the way, and I think it was only a handful of years ago, they allowed liquor sales. So there are now bars in Round Rock, but there weren't years ago. There were clubs. You could go to a private club that was pretty sketchy. And, of course, I wasn't old enough to get in them, but you'd see people go in. But, I think Dell probably did it. And then I think the Reeds investing Dell Diamond there. But also, frankly, it was the boom of Central Texas. I mean, you just can't not bet on Central Texas. Even today, I think we will always do well. This is where there's such incredible talent, and people want to be here. I don't know if people moved out to Round Rock years ago because it was more affordable than Austin. I think it was, just another option.
Yeah.
Maybe you could get a little bit of a bigger house. Maybe there was a pinch of affordability, and maybe the schools offered a little bit of a better option for some kids. Now it certainly seems like it would be more affordable than Austin, for sure.
So you're in Round Rock. You're growing up there. You're spending time at UT. And you got involved in some anti-apartheid protests in the 1980s at UT. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's a unique experience. I'm curious what that looked like in Austin.
Yeah. As I'm starting to work out with you that I am a dork, it's weird at 53 to figure this out. I would do anything. My parents were good about getting me out of Round Rock and bringing me down to UT. And I don't want to skip past that. They literally would drop me off at my mom's, place of work at the Will C. Hogg building. And I'd be 9, 10 years old, and they would just let me go. So I would be a 10-year-old walking up and down the drag, which I thought was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, I bet.
Looking back at it now, what I can't believe is that they would let a 10-year-old walk around, and I think they were hoping that I would just disappear and that they could get back on track to retire early. Your
parents don't listen to podcasts? Your mom does not?
I am definitely comfortable with the fact they're not going to hear this. So I did that, but Capital Metro, I think, started in 1985, a route that my mom would drive me to Showplace Lanes, Showplace 6, up near Westwood High School, and I could take the bus all the way downtown, and I would do that, and my friends would come with me. We'd go horse around in downtown Austin because it was a little more fun than being in Round Rock, but not much. There really wasn't anything to do anywhere. And then somewhere along the way, I saw that shanty at UT on the West Mall, and I learned a little bit about apartheid. And I bought a T-shirt on the drag during one other trip that said Free Nelson Mandela, which I still own. And I bought a gold medallion that said Free South Africa, which I still own the gold medallion. I don't think it's real gold, but, I wore it. Some things were stupid kid stuff, like buying a medallion and, listening to some rap music and that sort of thing, and thinking that made me a protester. But other things were truly, really learning about apartheid and how terrible apartheid was. And we have to remember that, South Africa was still, under this oppressive rule. And there were these great leaders along the way, like Stephen Biko or Nelson, I'll get to Nelson, Walter Sisulu, and Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela was still alive, but in jail. Yeah. And so many of our protests or, outspoken comments or anything were about freeing Nelson Mandela. So I would actually go down and work at the shanties sometimes, which meant, handing out leaflets and sometimes just being down there for some protests. And I'll get downright teary sometimes thinking about this, because as you learn more about it and how unbelievably awful it was for the people of South Africa, it was heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking to think of now. But I'm glad that I did it for what that's worth. I mean, I was just another kid listening to little Stephen Van Zandt and his songs about not going to play Sun City and things like that. And I thought that was protesting, and maybe I handed out some leaflets here and there, but it got me engaged in politics, and it made me understand that there are poorer and vulnerable communities that need help, and they need people to support them.
Absolutely. So you're doing all these things. You're there in Austin in the 80s, and you go to high school. You go to Round Rock High. You graduate. You go to the University of North Texas, the Mean Green in Denton, to go to film school, which I didn't know until you just brought that up earlier. So you go off to film school. What were your thoughts at that time after having left Austin? You're like, hey, I can't wait to get back. I want to do this. This is my mission. Where did your life kind of go into your early 20s after school and through college?
Yeah, there was no way I was going to get into UT. I was pretty dumb. And that stayed with me through my 50s. But but I also really wanted to get away. I mean, I absolutely wanted to get away. My sister had gone to North Texas, and I thought it was really cool. And in fairness, Denton and UNT, it really feels like a snapshot of old Austin. It's music, and it's fun, and it's art. And all that spoke to me. I liked going up there and studying RTVF. For a while, I was also a PR advertising major, so I learned some things on messaging, which I feel like all of that has helped me in my professional life.
Absolutely.
I worked on Necessary Roughness. The claim to fame was having to go into Dallas with a van full of guys to go pick up Jason Bateman and Sinbad in his kick-ass parachute pants. And go pick them up from some concert that they had gone to.
Okay.
And it was neat to work on that film and get some experiences. I mostly spent a lot of time drinking Schlitz and watching Jaws over and over again. And I can quote Jaws better than anybody, I think. But after 6.5 years, somebody had pointed out that I had a solid 2.0 GPA, and I literally had gotten a D for every B I ever got to balance it out to a C. I had crashed the homecoming parade with my own homemade float with my friend Jeremy that said Irish American Society on one side, but on the other side it said the Brass Key Club, and then the tagline was, for C students. That was fun. But then it was time to come home. Okay. And it was fun to come back to Austin. It was a really fun time. And I think that anybody and everybody who talks about Austin really probably focuses on what we'll probably talk about now, which is those post-college years that you have a lot of fun and you think that was the greatest time that Austin ever had. And it probably was a fun time for you for a time, and you have good memories, but, we'll get into that, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had Deep Nasta on as a guest. You guys both kind of were in similar circles at that time. Both kind of in Austin in the 90s, and that was I think kind of a breakout decade for the city. I think any guest we've had that's kind of lived through and been through that, seems like everyone's got a little different perspective, but what I hear is prosperity, creativity, a changing economy that gets bigger. What was your experience with Austin in the 90s, kind of coming out of school and through 2000?
It's neat, but it lends itself to what I think of as that Austin area bedazzled belief. The time when you think, this is what happened. This is also a time when people insist that they were at the AA meeting with Stevie Ray Vaughan, or what other thing they've kind of, the dying dendrites in their brain have made them, think actually happened. So, this would be earlier than the 90s, it would be in the 80s, but things like, I remember fondly the K98 River Raft Race. It was one of the most fun things in the world. My dad and I built a raft. It had to be 81 or 82, and it was so much fun. But when I think back on it, in truth, I can just barely remember that we were stuck out on what was then called Town Lake for like 2.5 hours. It was hot as shit, and we weren't floating very fast because the Sons of Aaron, which was the name of our raft, the Sons of Aaron Didn't really move very far, very fast, and there were all kinds of people being drunk and having fun. And I'm a, whatever I was at the time, like 9 or 10-year-old kid with my dad screaming at me to paddle harder. That's that bedazzled belief, the belief that it was amazing, and you're like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't so great. Another example of that is the tug of war. We've talked about this before. The tug of war did not happen every year. It was not sponsored by a radio station. It was one year, and it was sponsored by a state representative named Charlie Gandy, and it was like 5 ropes that you would pull across, and it happened over a few, there were like 3 or 4 or 5 rounds. 3, I guess it would be an odd number of rounds, so 3 or 5 rounds. And my joke was that after hearing this story about the bulldozer that magically appeared, I was like, that's bullshit, man. And so I actually Googled, and you can find these like aerial photos of the tug of war, which I worked on in like 2010 with James Moody to kind of recreate. But back in the 80s when we did it, I was looking at some of these aerial photographs, and I was like, there's no bulldozer at the end anywhere near this. What a load of crap. So that would be the bedazzled belief.
Yeah, so the trumped up stories. The stories that were just a little wild and crazy,
right,
that were unexpected and maybe played into that legend and lore.
So to the 90s, I think that the bedazzled belief is that we had, this nonstop parade of phenomenal live music everywhere, every single night of the week. And, I think if we all, as 90s era Austinites, stopped and think about that, we had Monday night with Alvin Crow at Broken Spoke. It was great. I loved it. Tuesday night at the Continental Club. Wednesday night with Don Walzer. Thursday night with Junior Brown and Cornell Hurd at Jovita's. You had your night of the week to be somewhere, but that was it. It was kind of like if you weren't at Jovita's on Thursday night, you didn't have a whole lot of other options. Probably Antone's had something, probably Continental Club had something. But to think that it was just melee of, fun times and music absolutely everywhere, it wasn't. It was great. It was fun as a kid, whatever I was then, 20-something-year-old kid. But it led to where we are now. But I am always constantly kind of reminding people this is where we are now, I think, is a much funner place than then.
Excellent. So let's fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about your career as we get going along. You end up working for a couple of mayors. Tell me about Will Wynn was the first mayor you went to work with?
Yeah.
How did you get that? Where did you go from career path to working in the mayor's office, and how did that kind of evolve for you, and where did that take you?
Yeah, it's funny. So how do you go from being a film student who can't figure out shit? I had a couple of crappy jobs. Eventually I wound up getting a job at the state that was a contract job and afforded me the ability to kind of, I don't know, I didn't have to work too terribly hard. So I could be a little bit politically engaged, which I'd always stayed politically engaged. But somehow or another, I would go to those Molly Ivins Final Friday parties that she famously had. Again, that would be your Friday.
Fill in people on Molly Ivins for those that don't know history, right?
Molly Ivins was this, just absolutely phenomenal human being. She was a really funny writer. She wrote a book called Shrub, and as well as many other great things. Her acerbic wit was otherworldly. She was probably one of the best writers to come out of the Austin area. I think we think of her as an Austin native, and unfortunately died a little bit too early, in my opinion. Shrub was about George Bush, by the way. I forgot to tie that together.
Makes sense. Okay.
And it was, she could be a really good needle in people's derriere. Here, I'll swear some, and then I'll censor that one. But she could be a real needle in people's butts. But she was fun, and she would have these kick-ass parties on Friday night, the final Friday of the month. And so at one of them, I saw a dude who was running the kind of coordinated campaigns for the Democratic Party for the 2002 races. And I walked right up to him and I said, hey, I need to run, some half of the country. I need to run to some half of the state for you or do something to help you out. And he looked at me and was like, all right then. And I wound up leaving the state, 5 days later and starting my role on the 2002 races, which didn't go well for the Democratic Party. But I was able to meet Mayor Wynn and eventually go to work for Mayor Wynn after staying engaged here locally.
And so he served for a while, right? How many terms did Will Wynn serve for?
Well, he was allowed for 2 as mayor.
Yeah.
So he had already served 1 as a council member. He did 2 as mayor from 2003 to 2009.
Okay.
I came in and worked, and people don't remember this. Will actually had a little bit of a rough go. There was a thought that he might not even be able to run for re-election because he had some, political failings in his first year. But then we did some really fun things, including he jumped off the Pfluger Bridge for a film, and it was actually kind of fun because nobody would want to just jump off the bridge, so he doesn't make him sound like a wimp. But I actually had to get up behind him and kind of go, "Jump now, or I'm pushing you." I was wicked pissed. But he happily jumped and then happily got out of the lake, Lady Bird Lake. Happily got out of there and probably would have done it again. Like anybody, the first jump is going to be tough. We pardoned Nick the goat on South Congress, this goat who was living in somebody's front yard and zoning rules wouldn't allow it. So we did something really fun with that and wound up on the cover of the paper, and John Kelso wrote a big funny article and a whole bunch of other things. And then Will does the most magnificent thing. This will make me cry. He does the most magnificent thing that Austin has ever seen. I think it was like September 2nd, 2005, we got a call while we were doing a fundraiser at 7:30 in the morning that we would have 10,000 people land in Austin that night from Hurricane Katrina. And it was several days into Hurricane Katrina having hit the Gulf Coast, and the people who were being airlifted out to come to us were people from nursing homes, people who hadn't been airlifted out yet. So it was really a rough, group, people who had seen really tough times. And what happened next was the most heroic set of stories that I could go on about with a whole nother podcast. And it really probably centers around those first 3 days that we didn't sleep much. I didn't sleep much. He didn't sleep at all at the convention center. And the man welcomed every single person. He called every single person an honored guest, hugged them and let them know they would be safe here and we would bring them back to normalcy here. And for the next 30 days, I lived in the convention center, and it was rough.
Yeah, I bet. So 10,000 people?
Well, 5,000 only 5,000 came, but we had to prepare that morning for 10, which meant we had to cancel all the conventions that were coming immediately.
Yeah.
And deck the convention center out, which luckily I still have like the map for what the convention center layout was, which, people think, what does that mean? But, you needed cots and entertainment and things like that. But one of the most interesting things was you needed showers.
Yeah.
So we actually had a dude. It was Jill Manessa's husband. She was our facilities director for the city. Her husband went down to Home Depot and with a bunch of Home Depot old guys figured out the routing for water and all the things they would need to build what I remember being probably 30, 40, 50 stalls where people could go shower. And that would be the showers for the next 30 days there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, wild times.
And you worked, what was your role with Will? What was your job?
It was interesting. I mean, you didn't really have a big office back then, so you kind of did everything. And the main role was communications, but for, Hurricane Katrina, I just basically stuck by his side and had to do it all. And I mean, luckily I journal, so I still have my journal and my little pocket journal I carried with me, and the number of people who helped through that and did amazing things. I mean, I was a witness to some of the most heroic things that ever happened in recent Austin history. I would never say I did any of them, but I witnessed them.
You were there. You were there and you helped organize a lot.
Oh,
I think that's, I mean, you obviously went on to receive some accolades and awards and different things, and I think it was reflective of your ability to kind of be a jack of all trades within the city. So how did that happen? When you talk about leadership,
jack of all trades is a solid C of professions. It's a two. I started with it's a 2.0.
It's C in college. It's an A in humanity and life, and I think that's the difference. Nice. And so I think that when I think about this with your situation, so you worked for Will Wynn, then was it Lee Leffingwell after that?
Just so you know, when you say the thing about humanity, which was, by the way, Perfect. Chef's kiss is what they say. My mom, when she does watch this, will say, "Oh, bullshit." And she'll tell you how terrible I am. But anyway, so I'm sorry. You were short and
parents are your best critics, right?
My
parents will be watching this too.
Irish American parents would be the absolute best critics. But you were starting to ask about Lee.
Well, yeah. I mean, you worked for Will, then you worked for Lee Leffingwell.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious, like, where did lessons on leadership, lessons on civic service? I kind of want to know more about how you fall into that place where all of a sudden you went, hey, I'm kind of doing this, I'm kind of doing that. Now it all worked together.
Right.
When was that moment for you?
It probably was going back to Lee. It probably was. I had left Mayor Wynn for his second term. I went over to Capital Metro. Mm-hmm. And, that was an interesting gig. Transit is highly important for the future of the community. And I got to work on some very interesting transit issues there. And then when a guy who had become a friend of mine, this crusty old grumpy dude, Lee Leffingwell, is running for mayor. And by the way, running against a handsome, young, innovative cat. And it, seems like that would be, the handsome, young, innovative cat would have been more aligned with Austin. But people seem to like that Clint Eastwood, get off my yard thing that Mayor Leffingwell had, because as we were diving into the recession, it seemed like there was a desire to have somebody who would keep their hand on the wheel and pilot the ship, if you will. And he had been a pilot, both as a naval aviator and then with Delta Airlines. So I think going back to the mayor's office, I was able to say, hey, what did I do during that last stint that I just sort of hammed it? And what could I do this time, but do it with a little bit more intention? And I was able to do that. Luckily, I got to work with two guys that were very friendly to me. I would say Mayor Wynn I went to go work with, and then he became a friend. Mayor Leffingwell was a friend who I went to go work with. So going to work with a friend of yours, you're able to tell them where to stick it a little bit more easily. So while other people would gesture to him and bow and say, yes, mayor, or whatever, I was like, come on, get a move on, old man. And I had fun doing it because he let me, and also because he was so good. He really, and he's not dead, and he's the most. He walked 5 miles today. I talked to him earlier today. He is a very healthy cat, but. Both of them were incredible gentlemen, and both of them were great leaders, and both of them were great leaders in times of incredible emergencies that we had in Central Texas. With Mayor Leffingwell, though, I was able to do things with a little bit more intention, and probably feel like I was able to craft my direction a little bit better. And I think it even helped me lead to my next career. I guess I never really thought about that.
Expedia is where you went next?
Well, HomeAway at first, and HomeAway got bought by Expedia. But what it was is because I had grown up here, and I'm a heavy guy now, but I'm half the weight that I used to be. I was 500 pounds at my heaviest. And so as much as I absolutely had this heart that wanted to travel, it's all I wanted to do was travel. I had to be realistic, I was in my 400s, 450, 500 pounds, and so there wasn't any getting on a plane. I used to take long road trips to make up for it, but that only does so much when you're in the middle of Texas, right? It's kind of hard to drive
8 hours, either direction.
Drive really far to be in the exact same, topography and environment. But I was lucky. I started losing weight when I was at Capital Metro, and then with Mayor Leffingwell to get down to some degree of normal weight. So when I realized I could travel, I thought, man, I got to get a job somewhere where someone will pay for me to fly around the world and I can get caught up on travel. So I went to HomeAway. They had not yet really started the kind of battle that they were having against the short-term rental regulations yet. And what was great for me is they had a really good look, a really good view about how to approach it. They didn't want to be no rules whatsoever. They were like, the founders of HomeAway could not have been more wonderful about saying, let cities create rules that work for them, but help them understand what works and what doesn't, and help them understand what we do and how we can either help them or, in some cases, they might be issues that wouldn't address HomeAway. And then later it was bought by Expedia.
Got it. So you've had a wide variety of careers, and today you run Smart City Policy Group. And how do you work with cities? Obviously, you worked around Austin. You learned a lot in the mayoral offices, but what does that translate to today in your job?
It's interesting. I still want to travel. So I wanted to start my own thing. I always knew that was something I thought I had to try. I'm so driven by those years of being so heavy. It really does feel like you're in jail, when you're 500 pounds. So once I sort of broke free of being in jail and I wanted to soak up every bit of life that I could, I traveled, I dated wildly out of my league and had a lot of fun doing that. And then I thought, I want to start my own thing. And so I did that. And the idea is that I'm capitalizing on the fact that for whatever reason, people would align short-term rentals, during the years 2011, 2015 or so, they would align short-term rentals with Uber and Lyft and with other new innovation economy issues, the gig economy, the sharing economy. Yeah. I'll be honest with you, it's the rental of homes. Like, I never quite saw it, but I'd be sitting on a stage at, the National State Legislator Conference next to Dara Khosrowshahi, who is the head of Uber. And I'd be sitting there and I would think, or whoever was the head of Uber at the time, and I'd be sitting there with some dude and thinking, gosh, I could just go and talk to cities about the new innovation economy, the sharing economy, the gig economy, and talk to them about how to look at this issue. I can help them understand with research and consultation, give them data. In the cases of how do they want to achieve compliance, I can help them figure out what rules work and what rules don't. But at the same time, a lot of people hear all that and go, it sounds like you don't know what you're really doing. And I don't know that I do. And I think I love every minute of it. Like, if I wake up one day and somebody calls me and they go, hey, will you put together a big report for us on, why women travelers are, concerned with, booking travel, through portals this way or that way, I have fun doing it. Mm-hmm. And I'll take it on. What the heck? Just give things a try. So starting your own business in a way has kind of given me the latitude to just try some things out. Some things work, some things don't. And at the same time, I still probably do 90% of my work for free, doing community projects, community issues, working on things, especially for Central Texas.
That's beautiful. So when we think about today in Central Texas, the issues that we're facing, I didn't put this in, we didn't talk about this in advance. One of the biggest things you brought up to me, and every time we've talked the last few times I've run into you, is really about this civic leadership succession. Oh, yeah. New York Times had an article, a couple years ago. Richard Ravitch, I think, was the guy. He was huge in kind of helping diversify the economy for New York City. And not that New York City's area wasn't already diversified, that they hadn't thought of some civic leadership. But we think about Austin, and I know, like, when we go back to the late 80s, early 90s, we really diversified how we did our industries. I've heard the stories from various characters over the years, including the Kosmetskis and some people in that space, about how we took us from a city that was really a state capital to tech, but then we went through the tech crisis, we need to do more. Here we are today, and a lot of those people that were leaders at that time, 25 years ago, are still the leaders today, maybe slowly fading here. You mentioned folks like Gary Farmer, George Cofer, Martha Smiley, Ted Siff.
Those poor people are going to be like, they're talking about us like we're dead.
They're not, but they are at a retirement age. I'm talking to all you guys. You're at a retirement age, and these are people that are ready to hand off the reins somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're going like, who's next? And I think that we do have some issues here. So I set you up, maybe in an interesting light, but I'm just curious your thoughts on this whole thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like to point out if we all know I'm not really the brightest, but I'm figuring this problem out, it must be a real problem. Martha Smiley, Mary Ben Ramsey, Gary Farmer, Ted Siff, George Cofer, Wade Cooper.
Yeah.
So many of these people dedicated so much of their lives to making Austin what it is today. And Austin is still the it city of the world. there is this bizarre thing I'd love to chat about this weird problem that we have with beating ourselves up. And, you know, we could joke about it. From the 1980s, people even did that. But Austin is the it city of the world. Everybody else, everywhere else you go, you can talk about Austin. The only people who ever say, is Austin kind of, you know, jumping the shark or something like that, has heard it from an Austinite who's perpetuating that. But so the people who he mentioned have made this such a great town. And I would argue with folks who ever, when folks want to talk about running for office, I'm like, man, what do you want to do? You want to actually be effective? Look at all these cats that were really effective and did all these amazing things for the community and weren't elected.
Yeah.
So Richard Ravitch was not elected in New York until the very end of his life. He was kind of like Wade Cooper. He was a business guy who got involved with the transit authority. But he really helped kind of shape New York and brought New York out of some real troubles of the late 1970s and early 1980s. And I got to see New York during that time, and it was great. It was real seedy. Nothing like getting hit on when you're like 12 years old in Times Square.
Oh, that's scary.
Oh, yeah, but it was fun. You know, in Austin, we have real challenges. And so all those guys have done this amazing, amazing work. So I read this essay obituary. It was really a fascinating write-up. So it was an essay in the form of an obituary in the form of an essay about Richard Ravitch's death. And I sent it to all those dudes. And I said, look at how important this is and your role is, and tell me who your successor is. And I got to tell you, none of them answered. Now, they may have an idea of who their successor is, and some of them I know are going to beat me if they hear this recording and they say, Matt, you know what I'm doing to have a successor. But I'd argue there's no clear successor, and there's no like, oh yeah, you can see that's his chief lieutenant. And if there is, I'd feel terrible if I'm,
But does that have to do with the clear organization at somewhere in the city or somewhere in the community level that would help organize this rather than just have it be totally organic?
Yeah, I don't know. But what I do see is this rise of kind of Instagram critics and people who don't really offer a lot of, what I would call leadership. You know, we have friends who will say just over and over again, they'll tell everybody, oh, I've been telling the city for years to synchronize the traffic lights. Because, of course, they went to transportation planning school and they understand that. That's such shit. But they'll gripe about it all day long. And but they don't understand that, how transportation planning works and that's been done and all that. But we have a lot of those people who will gripe. We know people who will get on Twitter all day long and retweet stuff and say all kinds of snarky things about community things. And you sit there and you think, hey, rich dude, if you just put an ounce of that much time into doing good community work, how much you could do to better people and to really better our community. So we need more of that. I do think we have great programs that are training people, but we certainly need to have the very clear kind of next generation of people who are from the environmental community, the business community, the legal community, who are coming up. It's funny, I say that, and it's the first time ever that I thought with the legal community. We do have legal friends who have done tremendous work and are clearly the next generation of people. One Absolutely. Of them is Rudy Mateer.
Yeah.
I mean, Rudy Mateer is like a hurricane when you see him come in. He does more in less time than any human being. I'm in such awe of him, and he still finds time to work out because his biceps are mad crazy.
He's been doing it a long time, 15 plus years in the community.
Yeah.
And is he a city council person?
He is, yeah. He might be the mayor pro tem now of Pflugerville.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very involved. So you and I were saying we see some of it, but maybe not an organized process for what that looks like. So I think what's at risk if we don't act now? What is it about this city that's been great? And we're not criticizing here because we appreciate and enjoy the city, but what could happen without that?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example, and I'll come back to that question, but about, let's just say, take mayors. I'm a mayor's guy. I love mayors, and I've known all these mayors since Roy Butler in 1971. Who's the next mayor? Now, the quick thought is you go straight to city council and you can kind of think of at least one person up there and you go, oh, that makes sense. Well, of course that makes sense. That's the natural place. But there was a time that you would say, what about this person, this person, this person, this person? And you'd have 7 or 8 people from the community that you would think, oh, well, they would be also great. And I don't know that we really have that now. So that's worrisome that we don't have kind of that clear funneling of succession. And then when you do think of people, I think part of the concern is, are they, going back to that Richard Ravage story, are they educated and fully understanding? We have Instagram critics and people who will gripe about stuff, but do they understand the data over the anecdote? Do they understand things, to the degree, good Lord, Lee Leffingwell could tell you how many cubic feet of water were coming out of Mansfield Dam on a given day. Insane data crunching was going on in that crazy engineer mind of his. But I don't know that we have that now. So you go back to what you were just asking me.
Well, I think what's at risk? What's at risk for the city? I think that's the question I have in my head, because we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, right. We are doing fantastically well. And, I think the amount of thanks that need to be given to Kirk Watson on a given day, the man should have, just people saying thank you to him all the time. And folks want to criticize. But he has, taken a role that he had already had, and he came back and he is leading this community and changing some of the dynamics that were happening in city governance so that we are being more effective and more innovative. What's at risk? Continuing that effectiveness and innovation. Continuing to grab the great talent that we have in Central Texas through these wonderful colleges, ACC, Houston-Tillotson, Texas State, Southwestern, even A&M, St. Ed's, and then the college that's over there in the middle of the town. But just joking, UT. But, we grab this wonderful talent that we get here and all the wonderful talent that wants to be here. We got to continue to do things that make this a great city. So that means, what's at risk? If we're not growing smart leaders who are able to say, hey, parks are important and open space is important. There are folks who will say that's not important. Give me a break. Ted Cruz was nose to nose with me. Really not a place I wanted to be. And he said to me, I love your city. I love the green space. I love the water. I just hate your politics. Listen to what he said, though. I love the green space. I love the water. I love, so many people, whether you're talking to businesses that are moving here, they talk about our kind of openness and how kind of open we are to a variety of different peoples and different kind of frames of mind, or the green space, the hiking. All that is what makes Austin great. So we have to have that, but we also have to have job training. We have to have safety and security. We have to have so much more. It takes a lot of leadership to understand all those different moving components. We can't just have somebody who just gripes on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that's what's at risk. We have to make sure we're growing those leaders.
Beautiful. Beautiful answer. I really appreciate hearing that from you, especially with your perspective. We're here with Matt Curtis, longtime policy leader, Civic connector, and the guy trying to make sure Austin still has a civic future. We will be back in a second after our era. I hope you're getting fired up about how cities work and how to lead them next. We're going to come back with the good hang section. We're going to talk a little bit about you personally and figure out what we're doing next in this world.
In every episode of Austin Eras, we uncover the city's history, vibrant present, and bold future. Just like Austin, your financial journey is a story worth crafting. At Collective Advisors, led by Adam Flagg, managing partner, senior wealth advisor, and certified financial planner professional, your story is in skilled hands. From investments to retirement planning, Adam and his team bring together a collective of dependable professionals to help you build, maintain, and enjoy financial security. Start your financial legacy today at collectiveadvisors.com or call 512-467-1923. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
And we're back here with Matt Curtis. Let's talk about how we turn all this real concern into civic energy in action. And I want to do the good hang segment first. So this is an opportunity to use your years of Austin, talk about your experiences, and give our listeners a little bit of guidance about where the great places are, at least in your opinion.
Sure, you bet.
So this is a very broad question, but what's the most Austin thing you've ever witnessed?
I actually scribbled something down when I was thinking about this, and I'm going to say this. In 2004, the police, there was a legitimate problem down on 6th Street. The band Ozo Motley got pepper sprayed.
Okay.
Shortly after that, there was, I'm either remembering this, that Ozo Motley either played at ACL or ACL was just shortly afterwards, but there was a lot of anti-police sentiment for like crowd gathering and that sort of thing. There was a lot of anger about the pepper spraying. I remember leaving ACL and walking down Barton Springs as everybody else would leave at the end of the show. It's like this sea of people walking down, but I tried to get a little bit ahead of the crowd. And I'm walking, probably with the intention of walking all the way back to my apartment, which is pretty damn far. And as we're crossing that little bridge that's there on Barton Springs, kind of heading over to, if I remember correctly, where Shady Grove would be on the other side, there was a row of cops. And I remember there was like the dude playing the drum thing, and there was dancing and all this crazy stuff, and the cops all had the flashlights with the orange cone on top, and they were standing in a row. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is awful, because as I remember, it wasn't long after the pepper spraying. The crowd was kind of crazy. There was the dude with the bongo drums and other people doing other things and dancing and stuff. And I was worried about it. And one of the officers stepped forward and had a whistle in his mouth, and he goes, "Brrrr," and all the officers put their orange lights up in unison, and then they went bam, 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 and they turned around and marched us down the road.
What?
And it was kick ass, because you had all these people who were having fun and about to encounter the police, and the police could not have handled it better. They marched the people down the street. It was absolutely beautiful, and the bongo guy went even more crazy, and the dancing people went more nuts, and I probably walked along in my New Balance tennis shoes looking like a dork for a little bit longer, but it was a fun time. There's a lot of things to remember. That's what's special.
Anything's possible in Austin. I feel like that creativity, I mean, what other police force is going to do that?
Right. I think we have spectacular police force. We pay them incredibly well, but they are really, really good people. I think they deserve a lot of support.
So music is a core memory for a lot of people when they think about Austin. Mm-hmm. We get to live here all year round, but what album or artist will always remind you of kind of Austin in your mind? Yeah,
just to be fast, I think the first tape I ever bought from an Austin artist was Joe Ely's Fingernails, and I bought it at the Union where he was performing, and I was probably like 10, 12, somewhere where thereabouts. But later, my friend Chris Schwartz and I would drive down in his 56 unpainted Chevy and sit outside the Black Cat because we couldn't get in, and listen to Two Hoots and a Holler. Great band. It was so awesome. They had an album called Step Fast, and they later played at my 30th birthday that was held in a backyard. It was such an Austin thing, and I must have asked him to play the song Step Fast probably 15 times throughout the night as I got more and more blitzed. But it was a fun time. Those are a couple of neat Austin music memories.
Was that a rockabilly band? What kind of stuff?
They were rockabilly, yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Right.
So they were rockabilly. They were definitely fun. Joe Ely, Fingernails, Marsha Balls, Luella, some really great songs that I think you could listen to today and you would think, man, that's fresh. That's new, and yet it's 40 years old.
Austin had its own sound back then, for sure. If you have guests coming in for 36 hours in Austin and you want to take them places, where do you take them? What's food, activities, life look like with that?
There's no two ways about it. Everybody has a strong opinion about their favorite taco place, their favorite Tex-Mex place, but honestly, they're wrong unless they say Polvo's. So Polvo's makes their own corn tortillas. That's it. Everything they make that's fajita, veggie, fish, shrimp, all of it is the best. That brown salsa they have and that salsa bar in the middle, I don't know what's going on with that, but I've been saying that since 1997. I don't know what's going on with that salsa. It's amazing. So that's where you start. I do think that I love the outdoors here, and other people will say hike the trail or something like that. No, screw it. Take them on the Hill of Life. Bust their ass. That's a hard hike. So take them down the Hill of Life. That's kind of fun, but you get to see Austin's outdoors. You get down to the water, then hiking back up. You're worn out, so you got to go jump into Barton Springs. There's no two ways about it. I love Deep Eddy on any given day. There's other places to go swim. But Barton Springs is magical. It's just magical. And to be able to swim and look at downtown off in the distance, I just think it's beautiful. And if you know where it is, you can actually kind of dive off the kind of little shallow, I don't know, it's probably 5 feet deep rock ridge there and swim all the way down to the bottom, and you can feel the water coming out. Just magical. Just absolutely magical. So Barton Springs, and then I'm a big fan for dinner, telling people, and I think this is, I think going to Broken Spoke still on its own magical. And I had a special relationship with James White, the owner of the Broken Spoke, and his family. They're wonderful people. It's still just important. It's an important stop along the way. But I love if you could so maybe I've gotten us through the evening, so maybe you're going to brunch. I would actually go to Mueller. And I think you go to Mueller because Mueller shows the best of Austin. It's innovative. We took, 700 acres of our old airport, and we scraped it, and we built this really cool community there. Colleen's Kitchen, Locadoro, great places to eat. You can walk around, really enjoy cool Austin. I think that would be my thing. And I think people would push back on that last part and say, well, that's not Old Austin or something like that. Yeah, but
it doesn't need to be.
It doesn't. And guess what? There was a time Old Austin wasn't Old Austin. I mean, things change. Yeah. Luckily, though, Old Austinites know it's called Mueller. Any other way to pronounce it is ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Fair enough. I've heard it thrown out there a few times.
You can say all kinds of words that begin with an M in different ways. It's Mueller.
What's a weird or quirky tradition that you hope Austin never lets go of?
Boy, that's a good one. I believe it or not, I think the turkey trot is like every single time I go out there and tell people that I'm going to run a little bit of it, and I just wind up walking the whole thing. I love seeing people get dressed up for it. I love that people are casual. I love that people always are kind of casual in this town. I mean, people are starting to step it up a little bit and get dressy here and there, but you can still go cash. You can still wear shorts, and nobody gives a shit. We're all okay, and we embrace each other. So, I think it's that.
Last and final question. We know it's Polvo's where you're going to dinner, but if you could go to dinner with any Austinite, living or dead, who would it be and why?
I'm fascinated by mayors. I love this city. I love how the city grew and evolved. And I'm going to say Mayor Tom Miller, who is the mayor. He was the only other mayor to serve multiple terms other than now Kirk Watson. He was the mayor from the Depression era through World War II. It's a pretty cool time to see what was going on with Austin back then. And then he was mayor again in the late 50s until 1961. And so I think it would be really neat to go to dinner with him and talk to him about Old Austin and how Austin was evolving and growing, and if what we wound up doing with the city met his expectations. I think that'd be fascinating.
I'm curious, do you think the mayors that you've met over the years and their vision, do you think that Austin's achieving that? What do you think? What do you think's gone right and what's gone wrong in that sense?
It's interesting. I think the answer is yes. I think the one I didn't know them all as well as I knew some of them, but I think they would love the fact that we are providing a sense of place for everybody. I think they would be frustrated with the affordability issue, and at the end of the day, it was their success that made the city unaffordable. Nobody knew that we were careening towards being the it city of the world for going on 20 years. So I think that those mayors, from Mayor Butler until present, I think they would say they're happy with where we are, but we need to continue to do better. It's a fun place to be. It's certainly a fun place for kids. I love that Mayor Watson is focusing on making it an even more fun place for kids. It just embraces everyone. And there's really, really cool things to do and creativity and innovation going on all the time. And we have the ability to make it our own. I go to other cities all the time. Man, they don't have anything on us. We're doing just great.
And the last question took us into that kind of future segment. So I think my next question is there's lots of other it cities that are becoming bigger and bigger. Should Austin worry about other cities, or do we just worry about ourselves? I feel like sometimes there's this competition with other cities. How do you view that as someone that consults with other cities?
Yeah, right. And I'll tell you, some of those cities are Kansas City, has a lot of good bones. Pittsburgh has a lot of good bones. Yeah. But those are two cities where elected officials have told me flat out, we're no Austin. I mean, Austin's really got it. But as the child of Irish Americans, we love to beat ourselves up more than anything the Irish Americans do, and the Irish people do. Austinites are so similar. I'm like, are you guys all oddly Catholic and Irish? I mean, it's so strange. You seem like you're just riddled with shame and guilt no matter what. They can't seem to say, wow, isn't this really good? You know, if you go to some of those other cities, you know, they have nice little corners and some neat, interesting neighborhoods and stuff like that, but they don't have it. They don't have what we have. So I think we need to focus on being us. I do think we have to focus on affordability, meaning how do we make this a place where anybody can be? You know, we need housing. We need a variety and a mix of housing. And there's a bazillion different reasons why, you know, some of the decisions we made years ago were not, you know, forecasting what wound up happening as far as our growth and our changes. But at the same time, we're doing so much so well. I would just say let's continue to grab that great talent and grow well.
One of the things that I read about and see a lot is this kind of Central Texas region and this idea of us growing into San Antonio growing into us. As you think about kind of policy in the future of a lot of different cities kind of connecting, no gap, no space. You worked at Capital Metro. There's the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. There's organizations focused on kind of this whole Central Texas area. What do we need to be doing as a city to kind of grasp that and understand what that change is going to look like in the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah. You know, I work a lot on that right now, and it's funny. I would argue that the initial growth is going to happen in the direction of Williamson County, Bastrop County, and Hayes. Maybe a little bit out towards Caldwell, maybe a little bit out towards Burnett as well. Probably not as severely out in Burnett just because the hills make it difficult and the lack of infrastructure. The highways, not as much highway out there. But ultimately, yes, we will grow down towards Bexar County and San Antonio grow towards us. Luckily, though, we're able to help them because we've got good tacos. You know, I think it takes regional coordination, and this is where it gets really cool. You're seeing regional coordination right now. There's a county commissioner from Bastrop County, David Glass, Bubba Glass. You know, he's really active regionally. The new county judge of Williamson County, the mayor of Leander, the mayor of Cedar Park, the mayor of Round Rock, the mayor of Georgetown, the mayor of Kyle and Buda, mayors of Kyle and Buda, and the county commissioner for Northern Hayes County, Michelle Cohen. You're seeing all these people work together more and more, and they're talking about things like water and jobs and infrastructure. I had a food summit on food equity issues, and I had 100 of these regional elected officials show up to it. So they are working regionally, and I think that's going to help us grow together so much better because they're coordinating. You know, they're making their different agencies and departments get along and work well together. And they're tackling big issues. I believe that the biggest one that's going to sew the region together and ultimately bring us closer to San Antonio would be to have rail. So, you know, we've got an existing rail line. All we have to do is get people rail on it. It carries freight and then occasionally an Amtrak vehicle. What we need is to find a way to probably find a solution for the freight.
Yeah.
Either move the freight off of it or kind of create additional tracking, which would be a lot of tracking, to San Antonio so that we can be moving people trains up and down that corridor at the same time. That would definitely help us with our affordability, give access for people to, you know, touch new types of better housing, and probably be the saving grace for the region.
Now, would that cost be far larger than anything we've ever discussed for bonds at Capital Metro for public transportation? I'm curious the cost of the railway and what that access would look like.
That's interesting. You know, I think that Central Texas is the economic generator for the state of Texas. So I think that solution is a state issue. I really do. I think that, there's probably got to be a lot of shrugs from some people and say, hey, we don't like the politics of, the city of Austin. I don't know, but we're talking about a lot of other cities in there too, Georgetown to San Antonio. And I think it's bigger than that. It's not about how people voted last year. It's about, our economy for generations. So I think it's a state issue and a state solution. We can have, if the state can help us move the freight to a different track alignment somehow, could we then build people rail on some existing track for relative, easy amount of money? And it wouldn't be Capital Metro. I think it would be the sharing of each of the counties and the cities, kind of sharing the cost burden of that. But they would also make the money back from all that new economy they're generating.
I'm not the political expert here, but are you insinuating that there'd be like an eminent domain that the state would vote on and drive the railway out essentially by law? Like that order?
No, I think it's probably just helping them find. There are some other freight track routes. I think the other one is, or pay for a new track alignment, which would basically be building a third track along the line of the two existing tracks that go north and south between Georgetown and San Antonio.
I want to bring up something that you launched called the Austin Civic Education Society, ACES. What is it, and what are you hoping that becomes?
Great name. I don't know how that wound up coming together to spell ACES so well. But it's going back to what we were talking about, civic leadership and growing leadership here. I've enjoyed my time with Leadership Austin, with Austin Under 40, with so many other groups in town. What I'm doing is probably more curated, intimate conversations with people who want to get engaged in civic life and want to understand how they can make a difference. In some cases, that maybe they want to run for office, but typically I can talk them out of it. I'm kind of a wet blanket that way. But it's getting them engaged so that they are getting into leadership roles, getting people into leadership roles where they can start becoming the new chief lieutenants on environment or business or legal. Right now, it's, we had a lunch the other day and a handful of people got together and had a really, really deep conversation with some really incredible people. And I'm hoping that there were some lessons learned from it. And as I do that more and more, I'm thinking I might kind of grow into something where I do a happy hour that's curated the same way. I tend to like to that sounds funny. I like to 10 bar. So if I can both 10 bar and put on a happy hour where people can listen to some other folks talk about the importance of civic involvement, then I would be happy as a clam.
I love that. So what's your advice to a 25-year-old in Austin that wants to make a difference? How do they go from being the guy that spent 6.5 years in school to kind of going in different job career sets to kind of finding their way? What does that look like?
Yeah, definitely don't follow my path.
Don't follow your path.
I think the answer is stay engaged, get engaged.
Yeah.
Stay engaged and learn how to separate the anecdote from the data. Learn how to separate that emotion from, kind of the factual information that drives policy making. Learn what it takes to make leaderly decisions. But number one is get engaged and stay engaged. We need people to be engaged in this community at a real level where we want to actually help. We have enough people griping. It's too easy to get on Twitter and say something, kind of snarky. Why don't you take that time instead and try to do something good for the community?
So what does that look like? When you say get engaged, stay engaged, I think for the average person that's out there, they may not even know how to connect. And I think with this partisan as this world's become, they're like, hey, do I join this precinct or that? Or am I doing this?
Yeah.
How do you do that in maybe a nonpartisan way and really just engage in civics?
Well, it's funny, but I think there's so many great organizations that do an incredible job. So you can start with Leadership Austin. So many different groups like the Greater Austin Chamber, Austin Board of Realtors has different young professional engagement groups. And if you can't find one through some of the groups that you're with, currently, then go find one. Find anybody and say, hey, how do I get involved? And stay with it. We just absolutely need leaders. They can look at austincivics.com, which is our ACES website, and certainly can feel free to reach out to me. But probably any elected official, any community leader that people see speaking on a specific item, whether it's, at their church or at their school, they can just sort of go up to them and say, how do I get involved? But they've got to get involved. We need it to right now, it's just too important. I'm concerned that the divisiveness that you kind of mentioned, the partisanship, is going to keep people from getting engaged who would be really, really helpful. Yeah. And we've got to get around that somehow. People have got to look back to, my grandfathers and their involvement with Scranton area politics. At the end of the day, they were helping to build a community, and that's what we need from folks now.
My final question is: you've had an ever-evolving career. You're starting some new things like ACEs. What unfinished work do you still want to get done? What are some important things that you kind of look for the future for Austin that you still want to do?
I think this is it, right? I think it's the mentorship. I think it's what we just talked about.
Yeah.
I built a business on mentorship model. I employ part-time employees that other people would call interns, but I pay them and I treat them like a part-time job, and I try to mentor them along. And I have been shocked at where some of those people have gone. I also have the, what we're doing with ACEs or other work, trying to engage people to be, aligned with, community needs. I think that's it, really, at the end of the day. I think that building that and growing that mentorship program, that initiative that just so fascinates me, that's it. And then I'd like to write a book about travel, but other than that.
Well, that was my final question. We can have you back to talk travel next time.
Yeah, you bet.
Big thank you to Matt Curtis, Smart City Policy Group, for joining us today. You've been a relentless champion of doing things the right way in Austin, even when it's hard. And I think that's the challenging part, and that's what I really admire about what you've told today. So I hope that everyone subscribes to Austin Eras wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have feedback or guest ideas, we have new emails and a new domain. You can email adam@austineras.com or our showrunner just off the screen, mel@austineras.com. And come out to the Austin Eras Happy Hour. That's going to start in January, the third Thursday of every month. You can RSVP at austineras.com/RSVP. Get registered, and we'll be recording live podcasts, including some of our attendees as panelists and maybe some past guests. So thanks again. We're signing off from Austin Eras with Matt Curtis.
Austin Eras, featuring Adam Flagg, is brought to you by Collective Advisors. Collective Advisors offers investment advisory services through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Guests on Austin Eras are not affiliates of CWM LLC, and opinions expressed by guests may not reflect those of CWM LLC. This show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes and is not intended to provide specific legal, tax, or other professional advice. For a comprehensive review of your personal situation, always consult with a qualified professional.